Om Sri Sai Ram. At the outset, I would like to offer humble pranams at the lotus feet of our most beloved Bhagwan. Sai Ram, dear listeners and viewers, and greetings from Prashanti Nilayam. This is my 20th talk in this series, which means I have been broadcasting this series for roughly 5 months now. That's not bad, I would say. Currently, I am dealing with the topic of Swami and formal education as opposed to informal education, which deals with Bal Vikas and things like that. Formal education means college, university, school, and so on. Now, in my last talk, I described the opening of the Anantapur College as also the college in Vrindavan. I mentioned that there were many features associated with these colleges and their relationship to Swami that few noticed. And these little noticed facts include the following. One, via the Brindavan College, Swami was actually running a Gurukulam. This was not possible in Anantapur because he did not live in Anantapur, but in Brindavan, the college was right next door to his residence, the old bungalow, and therefore there were ample opportunities for running a Gurukulam, which he made full use of. And secondly, Swami granted students of those days what I might call super intimacy. I told you how students did everything apart from studying and attending classes, everything from washing and milking cows to cutting vegetables and rolling chapatis. The students were those who kept the gardens clean and watered the plants. They even plowed the field using a tractor. Yes, there was a field where beyond the cricket ground or the present cricket ground, and they used to grow rice on the campus. Besides doing all this, the students also took care of a large number of pets that Swami had, which ranged from parrots and peacocks to deer and rabbits. All this and many more such tasks gave the boys opportunities for wonderful access to Swami. Something would happen somewhere, and by way of reporting that, they would sneak to Swami. Now, studies were important, but being with Swami and catching his eye as often as possible was always a priority number one with the students. Back then, the students did not realize the value of the opportunity they were getting. But those early birds, if I may call them that, enjoyed real Gokulam experience. How do I know this to be true? Because I have heard many recalls from students of those days, and in fact, we have got recordings with many of them. Now, till the very end, Swami was always available to students. However, the supreme intimacy of the early Brindavan days lasted only for a short while. To me, it was like the brief period when Lord Krishna gave all his time to the Gopikas before other items entered into his agenda. Let me move on and go to the year 1971. In that year, Swami organized the first summer course. I'm sure most of you know about summer courses, but the summer courses of later years were different from the very first summer course. Normally, the later year summer courses were dedicated entirely to the students of Swami's University. But in 1971, there were not that many students attending Swami's college. So what Swami did was, he threw open the course to the youth of India, anywhere in the country. Entrance tests were conducted and selections were done by the organization members in different parts of India, and youth, both boys and girls, were selected and brought to Brindavan to to spend about 10 or 15 days there attending the summer course. That was how the first summer course was organized. What about the place? There was no big place to accommodate nearly 500 or 1,000 people who attended. So a big thatch shed was built, and that was the venue. And the day would begin early with yoga classes. In the summer courses of later years, we had no yoga classes, but back then there were yoga classes. Afterwards, bath, breakfast, and some speeches and so on. And then would come the star attraction of the day, namely at the Divine Discourse by Swami. As it turned out, this 1971 summer course was a curtain raiser for many others that followed. The summer course of 1971 was in a sense a summer camp for young adults. And that was where they were exposed to the basics of educare for the first time. Although that word was never used, that word became current much later. As I told you, the high point of everyday's program was the discourse delivered by Baba, Bhagwan Baba. Starting then, we have had many other summer courses, and about that I shall say something later. But one thing I must point out is that for every summer course, Swami would choose a particular theme and speak extensively on it. For example, during my time as the Vice Chancellor, there was a summer course. I think it was in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. And the theme Swami selected was the Ramayana. Let me go back to 1971, the first summer course, and I told you that there was a thatch shed, which was the venue of the summer course. That was where the classes, if I may call them, were held. Swami's discourses, however, were not delivered in the thatch shed. Why? Because he always attracted a huge crowd. Apart from the attendees of the summer course, devotees would come from Bangalore and maybe even outside. So he delivered his discourses out in the open. Do you know where? I'll tell you. Back then in Vrindavan, there was a small square tank with water, and it had bunds on all four sides. It was a leftover from earlier times, and when the estate came to Swami, the tank was also there. And as I told you, the tank had a bund, and Swami would stand near the bund and address the gathering. There would be a big microphone, and public could see him from many directions. So, that was how Swami delivered his first discourses. And as I told you, there was always a big crowd, especially made up of people coming from city and other areas. For a few years, this was the way the summer course ran, in an improvised shed and Swami speaking from the tank bund. Meanwhile, remember by this time Swami had two colleges, one in Anantapur and one in Bangalore. By 1971, the Anantapur College had a very nice building, but Bangalore College did not have a nice building. It was still being run in a shed or a mandapam kind of thing. Later it became the Kalyana Mandapam. So what did Swami do? He said, Bangalore College must also have a nice building, and he launched plans for a proper building for the college. Obviously, one could not run an entire college from a shed. Many classrooms were needed, laboratories were needed, so many, a library was needed, so many other facilities are needed for a college. So Swami decided to build a proper college, and that college was quite some distance away from his bungalow. You all know where that college is. It is right next to the cricket ground, quite some distance away from Swami's residence or Trai. And the construction of the college building had been started. Now, having authorized the construction of the college building, Swami also wanted to replace the existing hostel with a proper hostel. The existing hostel was not at all a hostel. It was just a couple of rooms in which the students were packed. Everything was done in those rooms. sleeping, eating, cooking. That was all. But the beauty of this hostel was, though it was inconvenient in every possible way, it was right near the gate of Brindavan Ashram, if you know today's Brindavan. And on the as you enter on the left side, you have the foreigners' canteen and a small shop where they sell all sorts of things. And right next to it, there is a kiosk where you can have a cup of coffee or some snacks. It was in that region that the old hostel was. It was hardly a hostel, but it was very close to Swami's building, and the boys loved that because they could run to Swami's residence for doing something or the other. All the pets were in front of Swami's residence, so in the name of taking care of the pets, they could just go there and hang around or potter around. As someone said, we were not just students, we were Sishyas of Swami, and we just hung around doing whatever was convenient for catching Swami's eyes. Now, let me come back to the new hostel that Swami was planning. Swami had asked Colonel Jograo, a retired military man whose expertise was civil engineering, to plan the hostel, a proper hostel, and locate it right next to the college building. Why? Because it would be convenient for students to go from the hostel to the college. That was why. And Jograo drew up plans, and what happened was the plans were also approved, and a date was set for ground digging or Bhumi Puja. Now, 1 or 2 days before this Bhumi Puja, Swami came in the afternoon to the old hostel, or the hostel as it was at that time. He often used to do that. And as he entered that building, one small boy gave a letter to Swami. Swami took that letter. He doesn't read the letter as they are given. He just takes letters. And he went inside, looked at all the boys. There was a chair for Swami as usual. He sat there. And then he said, "Boys, I'm going to tell you something. You have all been very patient and living in this hostel, bearing its numerous inconveniences, but all this is going to disappear because you will soon have a very nice brand new hostel." Now, an announcement like that was expected to produce a lot of claps and all that. Nothing. There was silence. Swami looked around. There was only silence. So he also became silent. Then he opened the boy's letter and read the letter. There was only one letter. After reading the letter, he looked at the boy and said, "Boy, you wrote this letter?" The boy said, "Yes, Swami." Swami said, "Can I read this letter to the boys?" Swami was asking permission. The boy said, "Swami, that is your wish." Swami then called the warden or the principal, I don't remember who, and said, "You read this letter to the boys." And I am now going to read out that letter for you. This is what the little boy had written in his letter to Swami. He said, "Most beloved Swami, humble pranams at thy lotus feet. Swami, why are you upset with us? Have we transgressed some discipline that is dear to you? If so, Swami, please tell us. Do not banish us from Vrindavan. Why are you building a hostel for us somewhere far away from your presence? If you say that you are really not unhappy with us, then Swami, break down this bungalow and build one right next to the new hostel where it is coming up. We are not particular that we should be here. We are particular that we should be with you wherever it is." That is what the boy had written in the letter. When this letter was read out, the faces of all the boys lit up. They also had the same feeling, but they did not have the courage to express those feelings to Swami. Now here was a boy who said, "Swami, we love you. Nothing should come between you and us. Either we stay here next to your bungalow, or if you move us to the hostel there, then you also come there." That was a pretty daring thing to say. And Swami appreciated it. And Swami said, let's find out. Let's call Jograo and ask him whether it is possible to build the hostel here. Colonel Jograo was sent for. He came and Swami asked him, Jograo, these boys say they want the hostel here. You want to build a hostel there. Is it possible to build a hostel here? Jograo said, Swami, what is all this? You have agreed it should be built there. We have made all the plans. The Bhumi Puja is tomorrow or day after. Everything is ready. We have made detailed plans. This place is unsuitable, Swami. That's why we selected that place. If it was possible here, we would have done it. There is this tank. We can't build it here. Swami said, Jograo, what you are saying is true. But these boys are protesting. I can't do anything. They don't want to leave, Swami. What do I do? Find a way. The problem was, as I told you, this pond. Till that time, the pond was an obstacle. But once Swami sort of told Jograo, you better find a way was found. And what was done was, the entire hostel building was designed around the pond. First they drained the pond and they built the hostel building around the pond. You may find that difficult to understand, but if today you go to Vrindavan and enter the hostel building, you will see as you enter and come to something like a rectangular corridor or a square corridor, you will see a large low-lying quadrangle. It will be at least 15 feet below the ground level. That is where the pond once used to be. Once the concept was accepted, then the hostel was sort of relocated in this area. The decision was taken to relocate and construction began. And the construction occupied the whole of 1976. And what happened was, the 1976 summer course could not be held in Vrindavan because of the huge amount of construction work that was going on. That would obviously be a disturbance. So Swami shifted the venue of the summer course to Ooty. And the Ooty summer course is a remarkable one for the message that it gives. I won't talk about it here. I will leave you to go and read the book which is available. I think it is called Summer Showers in the Blue Mountains or something like that. Anyway, that summer course also had all the students attending. And on the last day, by the way, in Ooty, Swami had a big estate. And there was also a school there. And the summer course was held in his estate. It was up in the hills. It was beautiful. Everybody loved it. All those who attended loved it. I have talked to many of those people. But on the last day, Swami said, you have to do seva. So he told the students, you go to the city market, which is in the valley below, and start cleaning it. So suddenly hundreds of these students wearing scarves came there. And all the shopkeepers were stunned to see that somebody was cleaning up that place. It was very dirty. But they made it spick and span. And you know what? Swami came there in his car to see them. There are films of all that. And they were so thrilled by all that. So that was how the 1976 summer course was held in Ooty. And subsequent summer courses were all held back in Vrindavan till the very end. Now, 1970s was coming to an end, and it was soon going to be 1980. Swami had started one college, then another college, and his eyes were now focused on having his own university. He was planning on this for a long time, but he always did things at the right time. He used to say, Samayam Sandarpam Sariga Unnala. So time and the circumstances must be right. So he had a master plan, and he now felt that time had come to implement the master plan. In other words, he wanted his own university so that education could be imparted in his university the way he wanted, the precise manner in which he wanted. By way of getting started, Swami started yet another college. 2 were not enough, he needed one more. And this college was in Puttaparthi. And you know where it is. You can see it as you come to the ashram on your right side. However, When the college started functioning, this building was not there. As usual, it functioned out of some rooms. If I remember correctly, it functioned out of some rooms in the Ishrama school, which is adjacent to the sports ground. Simultaneously, groundbreaking or Bhumi Puja was done for building the college building. There is a photo of the college under construction. This photo is taken from the top of the hill behind the ashram. And when you see that photo, it is very striking because what you see in that photo are the hills, the river, and nothing else except some foundation in the ground that would be the foundation of the college to come up later. There was absolutely nothing. Today, if you try to take such a picture from that same spot, you may not be even able to see the college building because there is so much of construction. The college was formally blessed by Swami, I think, in 1918 November, shortly before birthday. Now, if you enter the college, you will see a courtyard, and at the end of the courtyard, there is a Vinayaka. So, the first person to greet you as you enter the college is Lord Vinayaka. We have an archival film showing Swami installing the Vinayaka and charging it with power. What is interesting about that film is that that entire area is absolutely barren. Today, if you go to the college, you will see behind the Vinayaka lots of trees, almost like a mini forest. Okay, now Swami had 3 colleges, and he wanted the Puttaparthi College to be the pivot of the university. That was his mind. And having established the Puttaparthi College, the next stop was university. And to get a university, you have to go to the government. An application was made, the wheels were set in motion, and the authority that grants sanction to establish a university, namely the University Grants Commission, sent a committee which came for an inspection. Here I must tell you, mention a word or two about how universities operate in India. The very first universities were set up in 1858 when the British government took control over from the East India Company after the so-called Sepoy Mutiny, or the First War of Indian Independence, as some people refer to it. The British Crown, having taken possession of the colonies, established 3 universities in 1858, one in Madras, one in Bombay, and one in Calcutta. These were the first 3 universities, and they all celebrated their centenary in 1958, and I happened to attend all of them. Afterwards, universities came slowly. Every university was set up by the government. The central government did not set up all the universities, the government at Delhi, but the provinces set up the universities. But nevertheless, they were controlled by the state governments or provincial governments. There were a few private universities, like the Annamalai University in near Chidambaram, and the the Benares Hindu University, set up by Madan Mohan Malviya, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya in Benares, now called Varanasi. There were a few private universities. After independence, there were a few more private universities. They were very rare. And Swami's university was a private university. To set it up, you needed a clearance, and that clearance was given by the UGC. The committee came, spent many days, went around talking to people, did inspection and gave a report. That report turned out to be a very glowing report, as a result of which we immediately got the sanction. Among other things, the report said this rather prophetically, that this university would be a beacon for others in terms of upholding moral values. As subsequent evidence has shown, that prediction has been amply borne out. Now, the moment the UGC gave the report, Swami made sure that all the 3 colleges, the one in Anantapur, one in Vrindavan, and one in Puttaparthi, came under the umbrella of one institution. That was the university. This was not easy, but Swami, being Swami, knew how to get things done. at the human level. So exactly as he had foretold earlier, Puttaparthi finally got a university. That was in 1981. Back then, India had only 125 universities. Very few of them were private universities, and Swami's university was one of them. Today, there are over 400 universities, and over 100 of them are not only private, but also unabashedly for profit only. For profit university only. These universities are set up not for giving education, but to make money. Please note that, for I would have more to say about money making via education later on. So let's get back to 1981, when Swami's university started functioning. Now, universities need a chancellor, that was Swami, but they also need a vice chancellor. And the first vice chancellor of Swami's university was Professor V.K. Gokak, who was earlier the vice chancellor of Bangalore University. In fact, he spoke at the time of the Bangalore College inauguration. And Professor Gokak came here with a lot of credentials, and he served in an honorary capacity. He did not draw salary. By the way, his son Anil Gokak served much later as the Vice Chancellor. That was from 2004, I think. Now, for a technical reason, the university established by Swami was not called a university, but as the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. The UGC was very particular that the word university shall be used exclusively for higher learning institutions set up by the government. Private bodies will have the name institute or something like that in them. However, they would be recognized as being equal to a university and be designated as deemed university or deemed to be equivalent to university. However, the short form was deemed university. At the time the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning came into existence, there were only 9 deemed university, and the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning was one of them, 1 out of 9. So it was not easy to get that accreditation, but Swami's University got it because of the glowing report of the UGC committee. Professor Chitti Babu, who has held many distinguished posts, including as the Vice Chancellor of Annamalai University, and who used to be on the governing body of our university, used to refer to all other universities as doomed university. And he says Swami's University is the only redeemed university. Anyway, once the university started, Swami became fully immersed in getting the university going, and he paid attention to every angle: the administrative angle, the academic angle, the examination angle, the hostel angle, and so on. And all these, behind all these things, was Swami's most important focal point: helping students to develop character. The university was set up for that purpose only, not merely for giving degrees. I would have many things to say about this, but let me first get some of the peripheral details out of the way for the moment. To start with, you had to have staff. You needed lecturers, readers, professors, and all that. That was not easy. Getting staff was not easy because Puttaparthi in 1980 was very much a rural area, almost like a village. And not many people, even though they were devotees, were willing to come and work here. That is one funny thing about people. They would say, I am devotee, Swami, I'll do anything for you. But if you ask them to come and stay here, that Swami is not possible. I've got commitment, my son is there, my daughter is there, I have to get them married, blah, blah, blah. So it was very difficult to get staff, even for God. But in some way or the other, those problems did get solved. And the most important point was Swami silenced all skeptics. A lot of them told Swami, to his face, Swami, setting up a university here is not possible. You don't know about government rules. Swami said, okay, we'll see. But he kept on telling others, including Kasturi, one day there will be a university here. Kasturi believed it, though he did not know how it would happen. But now Swami had shown he could make it possible. Not only that, and this is a very important point, Swami dared to do something which hardly any university did, namely to offer education completely free. As Swami often used to say in his discourses, in this university, everything is free. We have no admission fee, we have no examination fee, we have no library fee, we have no laboratory fee, and you would list all the fees. And there are no such fees collected in Swami's university. In fact, there is no cash counter in Swami's university where you go and pay any money. You go and see other universities. You see here, you don't have a cash counter. That statement is not rhetorical. It is 100% true. I know it because I have been the Vice Chancellor for one term of this university. Now, today, if you look around, as I told you, there are over 400 universities in India, and among them, 100 are private universities. Every single private university in India today is for profit only, and it is not shy of saying so. In practical terms, they charge mountainous fees. This is something totally unknown before. In fact, even in government schools and colleges, the fees have become quite high. So, all this is a part of modernization. And you know what? This is something that was not at all known. As in America, students are now beginning to take loans. Swami often used to say, today, Lakshmi has pushed Saraswati out of educational institutions and taken charge. There is a lot to say about how student loans wreck society, and in fact, this is happening in America in a very big way. Maybe I will talk about it later, but for now, I will just say zero fees was a very big deal in Swami's University. But there was a bigger deal, and that was character development. This is a topic that is going to occupy me a lot later on. But let me at this point recall a very interesting incident. It was a convocation, university convocation. I don't remember the year, it must have been 94. Those days the convocation used to be held in the Purnachandra Hall. I was a professor, so I got automatically invited to attend the convocation, and I would sit in the days behind Swami. And if I'm not mistaken, late Chavan, Mr. Chavan, who used to come here very often, the elder Chavan, he was the guest of honor. And after everybody speaks, Swami would speak last and deliver the benedictory address. And in that address, I still remember this very distinctly. Swami said, when Yashoda wanted to catch Krishna, she would hold out butter in the hand and say, Krishna, Krishna, come here. I got sweet, fresh butter, Navanitam. You like Navanitam, don't you? Come here, I'll give you. Swami said, Krishna will come, but you know what? Yashoda had a stick behind her. And when Krishna came near, she would, while offering the butter, whack him. Swami said, I also have butter in my hand, the butter of free education, but I have no stick behind my back. I call you to join this university, not to hit you with a stick, but to give you Atma Vidya. That is what Swami said, and I will never forget it. I don't know how many of you are watching or listening, but if some of you happen to be old students, please remember you were admitted to this institution of Swami for receiving Atma Vidya. He didn't sit down and have classes. Today is Atma Vidya class number 1, 2 and all. He did it in his own sweet, beautiful way, which is very subtle. Live back those days and then you will realize what he was teaching you. Okay, this is a good opportunity to change the gear and move on to the topic of educare. This word is much bandied about these days, but few know the intricacies of educare, especially in the way Swami exposed them. I will give a glimpse only, and I shall discuss A, what is educare, B, how Swami made educare happen in his university, and C, how exactly Swami exposed students to Atma Vidya. I mentioned Atma Vidya shortly. How did he impart Atma Vidya? That I shall explain later. Let's start with Educare. Now, everybody thinks he or she knows what Educare means. Many books have been written, innumerable conferences have been held, and workshops too, and so on and so on. But if the truth is to be told, I don't think many have looked at Educare beyond sheer pedagogy and hype. Let me turn to the word Educare proper. The real fact is that this word has its roots in two Latin words, both of which are related to education. The first Latin word is educare, and the second word is educere. Pronunciations are slightly different, and they also mean slightly different things. Educare means to support and nurture the growth of, while educare means to draw out. The former, educare, is the root word for the word education as it is currently used, while the latter appears to have gone into oblivion. What Swami did was, he resurrected the second root word and combined it with the first word so that education implied something more than what people took it to mean. And to this combination, he gave the name in Educare. This is an enhanced vision of education. Educare, Swami explained, brought into play both the drawing out aspect and the nursing aspect. What was it that was to be drawn out? What was to be drawn out were human values from the heart. And how do you nurse it? Well, you nurse it by instruction from outside and blend it with learning as normally understood. In other words, Swami's Educare was a two-in-one package which involved both the heart and the head. The heart and the head. That is the long and short of it. And the two Latin words I mentioned earlier, one of them is related to the heart and the other is related to the head. Both of them have to be brought together. That was Swami's idea. The Educare philosophy is now, of course, quite popular, and you have Educare institutions all over the world. But where Swami was concerned, now that he had a university of his own, Swami could give good full shape to Educare the way he wanted. He never used that word at that time. And he started doing it almost immediately. And the foundation for Swami's Educare program were the 5 human values: Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa. And now that everything was in position, what Swami did was, the type of education that was imparted in his university was known as integral education, that is, which integrated the head and the heart. Integral education is something I will not talk about now because there is no time, but I shall, before I end this talk, say something about the basic values Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa, because they are at the core of integral education. Now, we all use these words Satya, Dharma all the time, as if we understand them. And yet, if we are asked to explain clearly what precisely these words mean, most of us would flounder. In my view, the simplest and the best exposition of what these words mean were given by late Mr. Nani Palkhiwala. Today's generation doesn't know him, but he is one of the great citizens this country has produced. He was not only a top jurist and a very sensitive individual, but a very erudite scholar and a very nice human being. He believed in values. Swami selected Nani Palkhiwala to be a member of the University Trust and also chose him to address the first university convocation, which was held in 1982. And I am now going to read out a part of his speech because it is his speech that explains in a very nice and simple manner to a general audience what Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema and Ahimsa all mean. For the record, Nani Palkhiwala had a photographic memory. If ever he read something once, that was enough. He could quote it verbatim to the last comma, anytime, anywhere. This was God's gift, and he has stunned many people with this. There are a few people who have this gift, very few, and Nani Palkhiwala was one of them. The other interesting detail that you might notice that Nani Palkhiwala once served as India's ambassador to the United States. That was during the Carter regime, when the Janata government was in power in India. I will now read out what Nani Palkhiwala said during the first convocation of Swami's University, at which he was the chief guest. This is what he had to say about Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa, and so on. He says, "You will not find a word in English or French or German that will give you the full equivalent of the concept of Satya. Satya means truth. As in the maxim, there is no religion higher than truth. But Satya also means being true to yourself. It connotes intellectual integrity and acting according to your conscience. These various nuances of the word Satya have not been encapsulated in a single English word. In our world today, truth seems to be in the background, and it is falsehood that is on the ascendant. And yet, you never despair of truth." And now Nani quotes a poem from memory. "Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God, beneath the shadow, keeping watch from above his own." No single word in any European language covers all the elements of dharma. Dharma connotes righteousness, nobility, right conduct, a philosophy of life that makes you a worthy citizen of the world, and so on. Historians have been amazed at the fact that for centuries, India has survived without a central government or any strong authority engaged in enforcing laws. How? Well, what held the nation together was the ideal of dharma. It is perhaps the greatest, noblest ideal to which human conduct can aspire. That is what Nani Palkhiwala says about dharma. Let's now turn to Shanti. He says, "Shanti is not just peace. It is something that transcends peace. It is the calm of the mind which makes you find inner peace and total stability within yourself. Shanti plays a great role in any integrated personality's life and conduct." And now a poem. "We see all sides from pole to pole, and glance and nod and bustle by, never once possess our soul before we die." Those who practice Shanti have learned how to possess their soul before the last hour arrives. And now Nani turns to Ahimsa, Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa. I'll take the last ideal, Ahimsa. Again, there is no single English equivalent word. When you practice Ahimsa, you identify yourself with the entire created universe. It's a feeling of kinship, of oneness with all animate creatures. Ahimsa enjoins you to love your fellow men as well as animals and birds. I hope you got something out of the speech of Nani Palkhiwala, especially about Ahimsa. We all talk of Ahimsa in terms of non-violence. That means not killing or hurting somebody. It is much more than that. It means that we should not hurt anyone in thought as well as words or feelings. It means much more than that. We must not hurt any living being, be it an insect or an elephant. In fact, we must not hurt anything in nature to the extent possible. Today, if you go and look at the hills near Bangalore, they've all been quarried recklessly. That is in India. In other countries, mining industries have ravaged the landscape, all for the sake of selfishness. That is himsa. You are hurting nature. Well, I think I have said enough for the day. There are so many things to say, but it can't all be done in one day. So I'll try to continue in my next talk, and I hope you will join me. For now, I will just say goodbye, God bless, and take care. And as usual, I would end by offering this talk at the lotus feet of our most beloved Bhagwan. Thank you, goodbye, and I hope you like this talk. Jai Sai Ram.